She was only 4, face smudged with dirt, a torn red dress, curled up beside the air pump behind a gas station. No coat, no shoes, just a teddy bear pressed to her chest like it could make her invisible. Her voice, when the soldier found her, was no louder than the wind. "I wasn't supposed to be born." But it wasn't the soldier who found her first. It was Axel, his retired K9 partner, who stopped mid-step, growled low, and pulled hard on the leash. What they uncovered beside that empty pump would send shockwaves through a courtroom and awaken something long buried in them both. But before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far her whisper travels. It was late November in Pine Brook, Colorado, and the cold came not with snow, but with silence. The kind of silence that makes boots crunch louder and breath more visible. The mountain town was still waking beneath a thick sky, pale and unmoving, like a painting done in ash and faded blues. Frost edged the windows of old pickup trucks. Thin mist drifted across the shoulders of the highway like something half forgotten. Logan Brooks stood alone beside Pump 3 at a battered gas station that smelled of diesel and stale coffee. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man who had learned to make peace with stillness. He was 42, tall and broad-shouldered, with short black hair touched with gray, and a chiseled face shaped by wind, sand, and the weight of war. His eyes, pale and sharp, seemed always halfway between alert and lost. Faint scars ran along the backs of his hands and traced one temple, a souvenir from a roadside blast 5 years earlier in Syria. He wore a heavy green jacket and dark jeans, worn but clean. His boots were old military issue, the soles thinning from miles walked without destination. By his side sat Axel, a 6-year-old German shepherd, lean and disciplined, with black and tan fur and the steady composure of a seasoned sentinel. His amber eyes followed every movement around them. There was a faint scar on his right foreleg, healed long ago but still visible beneath the fur. The dog didn't fidget. He never did. He only moved when it mattered. Logan finished pumping gas and stood with his hand on the nozzle for a moment longer than necessary. The hum of the world around him, tires on asphalt, wind nudging the sign overhead, felt distant. He wasn't thinking about breakfast. He wasn't thinking about where he'd drive next. He was thinking about the weight in his chest that never truly left. Nights still brought dreams he didn't want. And mornings like this, gray and empty, felt heavier than armor. Then Axel's ears twitched. Logan didn't move at first. He'd seen that look before, the sudden stillness, the eyes narrowing to a point. Axel stood, his tail lowered, body tense. A low growl rumbled from his throat, not loud, but ancient, primal. "What is it?" Logan asked, already closing the gas cap. He didn't expect an answer. He trusted the dog more than he trusted most men. Axel began to pull, nose low, growl rising just enough to make Logan's spine tighten. They crossed the edge of the station's lot, stepping over slush and cigarette butts, past a battered dumpster that smelled of rain and rot. The back of the building was quiet, just a cinder block wall and a broken light. And behind the air pump, beside a pile of damp cardboard and black trash bags, was something small. Something curled. Axel stopped and barked, a single sharp explosion that shattered the stillness. Logan's eyes snapped to the form on the ground, a child. He blinked once, hard. Then again. It wasn't a trick of shadow. There, behind the trash bin, lay a girl, small as a bundled coat, limbs folded awkwardly like a marionette dropped mid-motion. Her hair was tangled and matted, chestnut brown streaked with something dry and dark. Her dress, once red, now faded to rust, was torn at the hem. No coat, no gloves, no shoes. Her bare legs were pressed to her chest. One arm clutched a dirty, one-eyed teddy bear, so tightly that the stuffing showed at the seams. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Logan froze. Something inside him, something buried under discipline and dust, rose sharply. Not panic, not fear. Something deeper. Familiar. The same wrench he'd felt kneeling beside wounded children in desert villages. The same quiet rage that came from watching helplessness, ignored. Axel sat down beside the girl, posture rigid, eyes on Logan. The soldier didn't speak. Not yet. He took a slow step forward, his boots crackling over gravel. She didn't move, not a flinch, not a whisper. Logan scanned her face, pale, lips cracked, dirt crusted in the corners of her mouth. No bruises, but the kind of thinness that didn't come from skipping a meal. It was the kind of hunger that whispered over time, that took days to become this hollow, that came from being forgotten. His breath caught. Where had she come from? No other footprints in the gravel, no bags, no adult nearby. And then the thought struck him, hard and merciless. She had been left here. She had walked, maybe even crawled, to this place and collapsed behind a trash bin like she belonged there. Like the world had taught her already that she should not be seen, that she was a burden to be hidden. Logan's fists clenched inside his jacket. He'd seen the aftermath of neglect before. Babies left in war zones, children who stared without blinking. But this was Pine Brook. This was supposed to be safe. And this girl had the look of someone who hadn't cried in a long time, because no one had answered when she did. The emergency room at Pine Brook General was lit with a cold, clinical light that made everything feel a little more distant, a little more unreal. Fluorescent bulbs hummed softly overhead, and the linoleum floor squeaked under Logan Brooks's boots as he walked through the automatic doors with the unconscious child in his arms. Axel padded silently beside him, his black and tan coat already dusted with fine flecks of frost. Nurses glanced up from their desks, surprised. Not at the man, but at what he carried. The receptionist, a round-faced woman in her 50s with shoulder-length gray-blonde hair and tired blue eyes, stood quickly. "Sir, she's alive," Logan said hoarsely. "But barely." The woman, her name tag read Deborah, didn't ask further. She picked up a phone and called for trauma support. Moments later, a pair of nurses burst through the swinging double doors. One young and pale, the other older with a lined face and ginger hair in a tight braid. The elder nurse, Helen, took one look at the girl in Logan's arms and muttered under her breath, "Jesus Christ." They placed her on a gurney with practiced efficiency, removing the thin jacket Logan had thrown over her. Her red dress clung to her thin frame like it was stitched to her ribs. Her legs were bluish, her feet nearly white. Still, she never stirred. The bear stayed in her arms, even as they tried to lift it gently away. "She's 4," Logan said, watching as they rushed her through the doors. She was alone. Deborah looked at him as if processing something that didn't compute. "You the father?" "No," he answered quietly, "just someone who found her." In the waiting area, Logan sat down heavily, elbows on his knees. Axel lay at his feet, chin on his paws, amber eyes trained on the corridor. Neither of them spoke. Outside the window, frost was forming on the edges of the glass, obscuring the view of the pine trees swaying behind the hospital's old parking lot. 20 minutes passed, maybe more. A doctor finally approached. She was tall, in her early 40s, with straight light brown hair pulled back into a low ponytail and gray-blue eyes behind rectangular glasses. Her white coat had Dr. Sarah M. Jennings stitched in neat embroidery. She carried herself with the precision of someone who had long ago trained her emotions to fall into line. Logan stood as she neared. "She okay?" Sarah nodded slowly. "She's stable, no injuries, but she's dehydrated, malnourished, and severely hypothermic. No bruising, no fractures, but the lab work shows chronic neglect. This wasn't just a bad night." He swallowed. "Will she wake up soon?" "She's waking now. We gave her warm fluids and started a mild IV. Her core temp is coming back. Her voice is weak, but she's aware." The doctor paused, eyeing him. "We don't have her name, no ID, no records in the system." "She didn't have anything on her," Logan said. "Nothing but a teddy bear." "You said you found her behind a gas station?" Logan nodded. "Curled up near a trash bin, no shoes. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even shivering." The doctor's expression hardened in a way only someone who had seen too many small tragedies could do without showing cracks. "You can come see her. She's alert, but quiet." He followed her through the hallway. Axel trotted behind, nails tapping lightly on tile. When they reached the room, Sarah stopped. "Technically, animals aren't allowed, but if he's her emotional anchor, I'll look the other way." "He won't move," Logan said. Inside, the girl lay on a narrow hospital bed, wrapped in layers of warm blankets. Her face was still pale, but no longer blue. A light pink had returned to her lips, and her eyes, large and hazel, filled with something too old for 4 years, were open and watching the ceiling. The bear sat next to her, now placed neatly at her side. She clutched its paw like a hand. Logan entered slowly, crouching near the foot of the bed. "Hey," he said softly. Her eyes moved to him. She didn't flinch. "You feeling warmer now?" No reply, just a blink. Dr. Jennings stepped to her side. "Can you tell us your name, sweetheart?" The girl's lips parted slightly. Her voice came as a breath, barely audible. "I just wanted to say happy birthday." Logan's stomach twisted. Sarah nodded gently. "That's okay. You're safe now. You don't have to say anything else." Axel sat beside the bed. The girl turned her gaze to him. For the first time, her expression changed. Just a flicker, curiosity, familiarity. She didn't reach for him, but she didn't pull away either. Logan watched, silent. He didn't know what made him feel it exactly, but he was certain. She didn't expect to be here tomorrow, or next week. She had the look of a child who'd learned not to belong anywhere. He stayed with her through the afternoon. Nurses came and went. Sarah returned with a clipboard, quietly explaining that CPS would be notified, that they'd need to find out who the girl was and why no one was looking for her. Logan nodded, but said nothing. At some point, a young woman from housekeeping brought in a tray with apple slices and warm oatmeal. The girl didn't eat right away, but after 10 minutes, she took a bite. Then another. Logan left the room only once, to grab something from the truck. When he returned, he handed her a small spiral notebook and 3 colored pencils, red, green, and brown. She looked at them, then at him. "Thought you might want to draw something." She didn't reply. But later, as the sky outside turned a deeper gray, she picked up the red pencil. The first strokes were uncertain. Then shapes started to form. A tall figure with short hair. A dog beside him. And herself. Tiny, stick-thin, but with a wide circle around all 3. She didn't draw anyone else. Logan didn't comment. He just leaned back in the chair, Axel curled beside his boots, and for a brief, quiet moment, he didn't feel the ache in his chest quite so heavily. The morning fog still clung to the edges of Pinebrook's narrow roads as Logan guided the truck down an uneven gravel path, lined with dead weeds and tilted mailboxes. The houses grew smaller the deeper they went. Paint peeled, porches sagged, and fences leaned as if tired of standing. The truck's heater whispered quietly, but the air inside still felt cold. In the passenger seat, Maya sat curled against the door, both hands wrapped tightly around her teddy bear. Her hair had been combed gently by a nurse before they left the hospital, but it was already starting to tangle again. She wore an oversized navy blue sweatshirt that swallowed her small frame and the same faded red dress beneath it. She hadn't said a word since they'd left. Her wide hazel eyes just stared out the window, blinking slowly, like she was memorizing the path back to a place she didn't want to return to. Axel sat behind her, his body tense even though he appeared still. His eyes flicked between the road and the girl. Every now and then, his ears would twitch in her direction, as if listening for something only he could hear. "We're almost there?" Logan asked, voice quiet but clear. Maya gave the faintest nod and pointed a small finger down a side road. Logan turned. They passed a field full of brittle grass, then a sagging fence with half its boards missing. Finally, they reached a small single-story house with pale blue paint weathered to the point of gray. A wooden porch stretched out like a tired limb, and all the windows were covered with thick patterned curtains. There were no toys outside, no signs of children, just a white plastic chair overturned near the steps and a chipped flower pot with nothing growing in it. Logan stopped the truck and got out. He opened the door for Maya, but she didn't move right away. After a long pause, she slid down from the seat and stood on the gravel, her teddy bear held so close it covered half her face. Axel jumped out beside her and stood still, head tilted. The front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch, arms folded tight against her chest. She was around 38, tall and narrow, with pale skin and sharp features. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her face wore no makeup, just the weariness of someone who had given up pretending. Her eyes were narrow, her mouth tight, as if everything in the world annoyed her. She wore a long-sleeved gray pajama top and loose dark pants, and she didn't move from the doorway. "Maya," she said, voice flat, "where have you been all night?" The little girl said nothing. She looked at her shoes. "I brought her to the hospital," Logan said. He stepped forward, keeping his tone calm. "She passed out behind a gas station. It was below freezing." The woman's eyes flicked to him, then back to Maya. "You weren't supposed to leave the house." Still no response from the girl. The woman's gaze returned to Logan. "Who are you?" "Logan Brooks," he said. "I found her, stayed with her through the night. They let her out this morning." Victoria Hale's expression didn't change. She's always been sensitive, too emotional. Her mother spoiled her. "She was severely dehydrated and malnourished," Logan said evenly. "I feed her just fine. She's picky," Victoria replied. "You know how kids are." Behind him, Axel let out a low, soft growl. Victoria's eyes moved toward the dog, then quickly back to Maya. "She'll be fine," Victoria said. "Thank you for bringing her back." Maya remained rooted to the gravel, unmoving. "I'd like to keep checking in on her," Logan said, his tone unchanged. "If it's all right, maybe I could take her to school, help her get back into routine." Victoria raised one eyebrow. "School?" "She's enrolled, right?" "I haven't decided when to send her back," she said slowly. "But sure, if it'll shut the neighbors up. They've been asking questions." "Which school is she at?" "Pinebrook Elementary, first grade, started late." There was a pause. Maya finally climbed the steps slowly, but she didn't go inside until Victoria stepped out of the way. The girl passed her without a word, her head down. The teddy bear never left her arms. As the door began to close, Logan glanced at Axel. The dog hadn't stopped watching Victoria. His body remained still, but his fur had bristled along his back. Logan noted it. Axel didn't growl at everyone. Back in the truck, Logan sat for a few minutes before driving off. The image of that blue house stayed in his mind longer than it should have. Something about the silence there felt unnatural. The way Maya had hesitated, the way Victoria had spoken, it all left an aftertaste he couldn't shake. As they rolled down the road, Axel turned to look back through the rear window. The house with the blue fence disappeared behind them. The wind rattled the windows of Logan's modest cabin, whispering like a warning through the pine trees outside. The fireplace crackled low, casting orange shadows against the wooden walls. It was almost midnight. Logan sat in a faded armchair, a steaming mug of coffee cradled between his palms. Axel lay stretched across the rug, his black and tan coat rising and falling steadily with each breath. The day had been long. Logan had dropped Maya at school in the morning and picked her up in the afternoon, just like they'd agreed. Victoria hadn't said much, only nodded from behind the doorframe when he arrived. Maya, as always, had walked slowly, clinging to her worn teddy bear and never looking back. She never smiled. Not once. But she didn't resist him either. Logan rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept well in days. Too many memories clawed their way back at night, of deserts, explosions, faces he'd tried to forget. Axel always sensed the worst moments before they came, pressing his weight against Logan's legs or resting his muzzle on his lap. A soft sound snapped him from thought, a whisper of paper brushing wood. Logan turned his head toward the front door. There, just inside the threshold, lay a thin spiral-bound notebook, the kind a child would use in school. He stood, slowly walked to the door, opened it. The porch was empty, but Axel was already at his side, ears forward, sniffing the pages. Logan closed the door gently, brought the notebook to the table, and sat. He opened the cover. A few crayon drawings on the first pages, stick figures holding hands. One had brown hair and a beard, another had pointed dog ears and a wagging tail, and in the center, a little girl in a red dress. He flipped further. About halfway through, a folded envelope slipped out. A small white thing, yellowed at the edges, addressed in neat cursive, "For Maya, only if I'm gone." Logan stared at it, heart slowing, mind sharpening. With trembling hands, he unfolded the letter inside. "My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. Please forgive me. Please forgive me for leaving you behind. If anything happens to me, do not let Victoria raise you. I know she's family by blood, but she is not family by love. She doesn't understand what it means to care for a child. Not really. She wasn't always like this, but something in her turned dark long ago. She hides it well. But I've seen it. Promise me, little one, don't stay. Find someone kind. Find someone who looks at you like you matter. Love, Mom. The paper fluttered slightly in Logan's fingers. The firelight flickered. Axel growled low, barely a sound, more of a vibration in the air. A knock on the door. Logan slipped the letter back into the notebook and tucked it beneath the couch cushion. He opened the door to find a man in a heavy canvas jacket and knit cap, breathing hard from the cold. "Evening," the man said. His voice was rough, like gravel under boots. "Sorry to come by unannounced. Name's Tom Keller. Live 2 houses down from the blue place. Figured I'd talk to you sooner or later." Logan studied the man. He looked around 60, wiry with weathered skin and deep crow's feet. His hands were calloused, fingers stained faintly with engine grease. "What's this about?" Logan asked. Tom shifted his weight. "Your dog's been sniffing my fence line past few days. Didn't bother me, but tonight he stopped cold at the edge and stared toward the blue house like he saw a ghost." Logan looked down at Axel. The German Shepherd's body was stiff now, his eyes fixed on Tom, not aggressively, but alert. "I knew Maya's mama," Tom said, "before she passed. Decent woman, quiet, always smiled at my wife when they walked past. That little girl was her whole world." Logan gestured for him to come inside. Tom stepped into the warmth, removing his hat. "She ever say anything about Victoria?" Logan asked. Tom sighed. "Only once, said Victoria was complicated. She avoided the topic. I got the feeling they had a falling out years ago. Heard yelling one night. Real bad. After that, we never saw the aunt around till the funeral." Logan said nothing, just watched the firelight dance in Axel's eyes. The pieces were forming, slowly. Too slowly. "You think something's wrong over there?" Tom asked. Logan nodded once. "I don't have proof, but I have reason to look closer." Tom nodded back. "You need anything, you knock. Folks here stay out of each other's business, but someone's got to care." After Tom left, Logan walked to the couch, pulled out the notebook again. He flipped back to the first drawing. He traced a finger over the small figure in red crayon. Maya had chosen to bring the letter to him. That meant everything. Morning arrived with a silver hush. Snow had fallen during the night, blanketing Pine Brook in silence. Logan parked the old pickup just outside the elementary school, watching Maya through the windshield as she clutched her rolled-up drawing close to her chest. Her tiny hands, red from the cold, trembled slightly as she adjusted her scarf, a faded blue one, fraying at the ends. Logan stepped out and walked around to open the passenger door. "You sure you're ready?" Maya looked up. Her pale face, framed by unbrushed blonde hair, bore no expression. She nodded and whispered, "Yes, Mr. Logan." Then she stepped down carefully, boots crunching the fresh snow. Inside the school, the warmth hit like a wave. Children ran past in squeaky boots, some tossing snowballs outside the windows. Logan accompanied Maya to the classroom door, where a young teacher in her early 30s met them. "Hi there," she said with a bright but gentle smile. "You must be Mr. Brooks. I'm Miss Clara Benton." Clara stood about 5'7", with warm brown eyes and curly chestnut hair tied into a ponytail. Her posture was confident, but she moved with careful gentleness. She wore a maroon cardigan over a long tan dress, and a gold pendant rested just above her collarbone. Logan extended a hand. "Thanks for taking time." Clara shook it. "It's no trouble. Maya's special. Quiet but observant. I've been wanting to talk with someone about her for a while." Logan glanced at Maya, who was now seated near the window, unrolling her drawing. Clara motioned him to look. "She drew this at home?" Clara asked. Logan nodded. "Didn't say much. Just said it was for school." The drawing, simple yet haunting, showed a child standing alone in a snowy field. Behind her stood a large German shepherd with alert eyes and a protective stance, clearly Axel. And above, in pale, drifting lines, was the faint outline of a woman's face, barely there, like a memory fading into fog. Notably, there was no sign of Victoria. "She's never drawn anyone from her house," Clara said quietly. "Never even mentioned her aunt." Logan clenched his jaw. "Has she talked to anyone else?" Clara shook her head. Maya flinches when adults raise their voices, even if they're not speaking to her. She watches doors more than faces, and every time someone praises her drawing, she hides it. Clara turned, eyes narrowing with thought. "Mr. Brooks, has anyone checked her home environment?" "I'm starting to," Logan replied, "and I might need your help." They exchanged numbers. Clara handed him a note. This was in her desk. A diary entry, maybe. I didn't read it. Figured it was personal. Logan folded the paper and slipped it into his coat pocket. Later that afternoon, Logan stood on the porch of a small building with a bronze plaque that read, Jackson and Hill Attorneys at Law. The door creaked open and a tall man stepped out. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal overcoat and pressed slacks. His short-cropped blonde hair was just beginning to gray at the temples, and a faint scar ran along his chin, a gift from a roadside bomb in Fallujah. "Logan Brooks," the man said, grinning. "Didn't think I'd see your face outside a memorial service." "Hello, Jeremy." Jeremy Hill was Logan's old squad medic, turned attorney, now a family law specialist in Pine Brook. Despite the crisp business attire, the man still walked with a soldier's precision and a medic's patience. They shook hands firmly. "Still have that mutt with you?" Jeremy asked. Logan tilted his head. "Axel's the best partner I've had." Inside, the office was warm, lined with books and plaques. Logan unfolded the letter from Maya's mother and placed it on the desk. Then he told Jeremy everything. Victoria's demeanor, Axel's reactions, Maya's silence, and now this drawing. Jeremy listened with growing concern. "You need temporary guardianship," he said at last. "That letter from her mother helps. I'll draft the emergency petition." "What are the odds?" Logan asked. Jeremy sighed. "Depends on whether there's documented abuse. But if you can get a social worker or teacher to speak up and the child shows clear distress, it strengthens your case." "I've got Clara," Logan said. Jeremy nodded. "Then let's give Maya a fighting chance." That evening, Logan drove Maya home from school. She was quiet, watching the trees blur past. "You can draw more if you want," he said softly. She hesitated. "Can I keep it? The picture?" "It's yours," Logan replied. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook, the same one she had used before. This time, she flipped to the back. There, in wobbly print, she had begun to write, "I don't know what to call this, but it's the first time I want to write things down." She didn't show him more, but she smiled barely, a curve of the lips, small as a snowflake. That was enough. The courthouse in Pine Brook wasn't grand. It was a 2-story stone building tucked between the old library and a bakery that hadn't changed its menu in 20 years. But to Maya, it might as well have been a palace, one that decided the fate of her heart. Inside, everything felt too big. The walls were high, echoing footsteps in distant halls. Cold morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Logan held Maya's hand as they waited in a quiet corner just outside the courtroom. She wore a gray wool dress over thick tights, her blonde hair brushed into a neat braid, though a few wisps had escaped to frame her pale cheeks. Wrapped around her neck was a new red scarf, hand-knitted by Logan the week before. Her fingers clutched a folded paper, wrinkled at the edges. Axel lay quietly beside them, his black and tan coat groomed, ears flicking at each passing sound. He was 6 years old, calm but alert, his gaze never straying far from Maya. Logan, dressed in a navy button-up and dark slacks, looked more like a bodyguard than a parent. He sat still, but his eyes watched everything. His jaw tightened every time a door opened. In the weeks leading to this day, he had traded rest for research, reading every clause Jeremy gave him. The scars on his knuckles still ached from winter's cold, but this wasn't a fight of fists. It was patience and presence. The bailiff, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a tired smile, opened the door. "Mr. Brooks, Maya, they're ready." Inside the courtroom, the space felt even colder. A single judge sat behind the bench, Judge Lorraine Whitaker, a woman of about 60, sharp-boned, with cropped white hair and reading glasses she rarely removed. She wore no expression. She'd presided over hundreds of custody hearings. This one was different. Victoria Hale sat to the left, rigid and silent. She wore a navy coat and beige gloves she hadn't removed. Her auburn hair was twisted into a tight bun, and her green eyes narrowed every time Maya moved. Though her posture was perfect, there was a tremor in her jaw that betrayed unease. Next to her was Greg Sutter, her attorney, mid-50s, balding, glasses slipping down his nose, voice like rusted hinges. He had tried to delay the hearing, then tried to discredit Logan. Nothing had stuck. Jeremy Hill, now in a charcoal blazer, stood next to Logan. He gave Maya a reassuring nod, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, with your permission, the child would like to respond in her own way. Judge Whitaker adjusted her glasses. Proceed. Jeremy gently urged Maya forward. The room felt too quiet. Even Victoria's breath seemed to halt. Maya walked slowly to the small table placed in front of the bench. She looked up at the judge, eyes wide but not panicked. Then, without a word, she placed the drawing on the table. It showed a kitchen. Crude lines, colored with crayons, 3 figures. Logan at the stove, stirring something, Axel sitting nearby, watching, and Maya at the table, laughing. A mixing spoon in her hand. The red scarf was around her neck. Judge Whitaker studied it for a moment, then spoke gently. Maya, would you like to say something? Maya looked down, then up again. With them, she whispered, voice soft but steady. I'm not scared. The room didn't move. Victoria blinked twice but said nothing. Logan didn't smile or clench his fists. He just met Maya's eyes and gave a single nod. Firm, quiet, enough. The judge leaned back, thoughtful. Then she cleared her throat. The court acknowledges the emotional clarity of the child's expression. Effective immediately, Logan Brooks is granted partial custodial supervision, 3 days per week, with continued evaluation. Ms. Hale will retain oversight during the remaining 4 days, under a 90-day review period. A court-appointed counselor will check on Maya's well-being weekly. The gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, snow had begun again. Big, drifting flakes. Jeremy clapped Logan's shoulder. It's a start. Logan nodded. It's more than she had before. Maya stood nearby, still holding the drawing. Axel leaned into her gently, his warmth grounding her. Victoria passed by silently, her steps sharp against the pavement. For a second, she paused as if to speak, but didn't. She turned, heels tapping, and disappeared into a waiting car. That night, in Logan's cabin, Maya hung the drawing on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. She didn't say much, but when Axel curled up at her feet and Logan passed her a cup of warm milk, she looked around the small kitchen. She whispered almost to herself, "It smells like cinnamon again." Saturday mornings came with the faint scent of pine and the quiet promise of healing. Snow still lined the edges of Pine Brook's sidewalks, but spring had begun to tease the corners of the sky. It was on one of these mornings that Logan zipped up Maya's coat, helped her slip on her purple mittens, and together they stepped into the cold. Axel padded beside them, his steady paws making soft prints in the slush. Logan had found a small community center tucked behind the old mill road, run by Miss Delilah Owens, a retired art teacher in her late 60s. She was a tall, slender woman with silver curls pinned up beneath a colorful scarf, freckles across pale skin, and paint stains permanently marked on her corduroy smock. She had a voice like chamomile tea, gentle, a little husky, and eyes that knew when to give a child space. The room Maya joined was small and sunlit, its windows fogged with condensation from the heaters humming beneath them. Easels lined one wall, and the scent of crayons, watercolors, and old paper filled the air like a memory. A handful of children sat cross-legged on cushions, each lost in their own world of brushstrokes. Maya hesitated in the doorway that first morning, her pink boots clinging to Logan's pant leg, but Miss Delilah knelt to her level, smiled, and held out a brush. "You can paint something only you can see," she said. "That's your superpower." Maya blinked. Then slowly she took the brush. Each Saturday after that, they returned. The paintings Maya brought home started soft, blobs of blue and gray, shadows and white. But as weeks passed, shapes began to emerge. A woman with kind eyes, blurred like morning fog, a big dog standing under a tree, a cabin with warm windows, a little girl in red, always with her back turned. One morning, Maya drew something different. She was silent all the way home, the picture tucked in her mittened hand. When they returned to the cabin, she sat cross-legged by the fireplace, Axel lying close, head on his paws. "Logan?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. He turned from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Yeah, kiddo?" She looked down at her drawing. It showed a snowy forest and herself, small, surrounded by dark scribbles. In the center stood Axel, eyes glowing gold. "If I got lost again," she said, "would Axel find me?" Logan walked over, knelt beside her, and studied the picture. "Axel never stopped watching you," he said quietly. Even before we found you, he already knew. Maya smiled a little. Then she reached out and placed the picture beside Axel. The dog raised his head, sniffed it, then rested his chin back down as if to say, yes, always. That night, as the wind picked up outside and flurries danced past the windows, Maya fell asleep without the usual whimpers. No rustling sheets. No soft cries. Logan passed by her room just after midnight. Her door was ajar. Inside, moonlight painted silver stripes across her bedspread. Maya slept curled under a wool blanket, her hand resting on the head of a stuffed dog that vaguely resembled Axel. And there, just in front of the door, was the real Axel, lying across the threshold like a sentinel. His ears perked slightly when Logan appeared, then relaxed. Logan didn't disturb them. He simply stood for a moment, watching the piece they had all built together. The morning sun filtered weakly through the pine trees, casting long shadows on the snow that hadn't yet surrendered to spring. The ground crunched underfoot as Logan walked beside Maya along the worn trail toward Hollow Pine Cemetery, a modest hillside resting place lined with white crosses and small granite stones, some leaning, some freshly cut. Axel moved ahead of them, nose low to the ground, as if he too understood the weight of the visit. Maya wore a blue knitted hat pulled low over her ears and a gray peacoat that seemed just a touch too big. In her gloved hands, she clutched two things: a folded piece of lined notebook paper and a battered teddy bear whose fur had faded from years of being held too tightly. Her steps were small, careful, but she didn't ask to be carried. They reached the far corner of the cemetery, where a weather-worn headstone bore the name Rachel Hale. There were no flowers, no trinkets, just snow kissed against the base and a small hollow where the grass had never grown. Logan knelt and brushed snow from the surface. He said nothing. This moment belonged to Maya. The little girl stepped forward slowly. She looked at the headstone with an expression far older than her 4 years should have allowed. Then she gently placed the teddy bear against it, adjusting its crooked ear with a tenderness that broke Logan's heart. "I wrote something," she said softly, turning to Logan. Her voice trembled but didn't break. He nodded. "You can read it or just leave it. Whatever feels right." Maya unfolded the letter, already creased with nervous hands. She didn't read it out loud. Instead, she placed it under a smooth rock at the base of the headstone. Then she stood, took a deep breath, and looked straight ahead. "I'm not alone anymore," she said. Not whispered. Said. Axel, sitting a few feet behind, raised his head and wagged his tail once. Logan stood beside her, his eyes misting. He didn't say a word. From a distance, partially hidden behind a line of bare-barked trees, stood Victoria Hale. Her coat was black, fitted, her posture as sharp and cold as the wind around her. She did not approach. Her gloved hands remained folded before her. For once, her eyes betrayed no calculation, only a deep, distant ache. She watched as Maya placed her hand on the headstone, then slipped her fingers into Logan's. When Maya turned toward the path again, Axel circling protectively, Victoria turned and walked away. Her footsteps left shallow indentations that the wind quickly began to erase. Back at the cabin, sunlight poured through the window panes. Maya sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor. Colored pencils spread around her like petals. She was working on a new picture. Logan in the kitchen, apron on, stirring something that might have been soup. Axel lay on the rug nearby, paws stretched long, nose pointed toward Maya. In her drawing, she had given him a tiny cape. "Because he's my hero," she had said earlier with a shrug. Logan glanced at her from the table, where he reviewed documents, papers signed and stamped that made things official. Custody was no longer temporary. Maya was home. "Need more yellow?" he asked, pointing at her drawing. "Nope," she replied, tongue sticking out a little as she shaded Axel's tail. "He's perfect already." Outside, wind rustled through pine needles and snowflakes began to drift lazily down, dotting the porch and roof. Inside, warmth hummed in the walls, and the quiet thump of Axel's tail against the floor was the only sound. He lay there still, eyes closed, but one ear remained lifted toward Maya, just in case. Sometimes, God's greatest miracles come not as thunder or lightning, but as a quiet bark in the snow, or the tiny hand of a child who dares to hope again. Maya was not rescued by chance. She was found because love never stopped looking. In a world often too loud to hear the whispers of the forgotten, May we all be like Axel, ears always listening, hearts always ready, and like Logan, willing to carry burdens that aren't ours until they become ours through love. If you believe that no child should ever feel alone, and that every soul, human or animal, deserves a second chance, then this story is your prayer in motion. May God bless you for watching, for caring, and for believing. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below. What part moved you the most? And subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us love is the loudest rescue. And sometimes, angels have fur and 4 paws.